All right, we're not joined by John Hoover, does a great job covering Oklahoma, and with us from SI.com. John, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. I want to make sure before we say goodbye to you that we get into your trip to Alaska and all the things that you saw. I thought that was really, really cool. But let's start with this. Oklahoma looks like they're trying to be the leading edge here, and something that seems like it makes a lot of sense on the general manager of whatever they're going to do, who's a part of that Philadelphia Eagles franchise. So how did all this come about?
Yeah, it's interesting, Smokey, and Paul, thanks for having me on. It is interesting because Oklahoma has, with a lot of things, whether it's compliance going back to the mid-2000s or some of the stuff Lincoln Riley was doing in terms of social media, and then what Oklahoma is doing now with under Brent Venables' staff, just in terms of recruiting. What's interesting is they're changing the recruiting structure. What? After, 40 years or 50 years, and of course, Barry Switzer, famous recruiter, right? But maybe one of the best to ever do it. But Oklahoma's out front now. They're doing this thing where they're going to have a general manager, and the GM is Curtis Lofton, former Sooner linebacker, played for Brent Venables. And they're partnering with a former Philadelphia Eagles vice president named Jake Rosenberg. And what Jake Rosenberg is going to do, he's going to guide them through these early years of NIL, transfer portal, certainly where they're at right now with paying players. They're going to have to, according to court decisions, they're going to have to pay players retroactively. Well, now they're going to have to start paying them at some point in the very near future as they're on their roster. So they brought a guy in from the NFL level who's got a lot of NFL experience with the Eagles to come in and say, here's how and he's not like employed by the university. He's just a consultant, but they're basically retaining a consulting firm to kind of guide them through the early stages of how all this is going to work, because none of us who have done this, Smokey, for forever, like you and me, know how this is going to work. And I would anticipate that there's going to be mistakes made, but here's the deal. OU is going to be the first one to make a lot of those mistakes, and kind of set the industry standard for what to do and what not to do.
How much do you think it will be similar to the NFL, and what has to be different?
It's interesting. In the NFL, the general manager has a completely different role than the head coach. But would you say, generally speaking, the general manager is above the head coach?
Sort of.
No, in every professional sport that I know, the general manager makes the decisions and sometimes hires the head coach.
Right, exactly. So in this case, the general manager is going to be a key liaison. He's going to be one of those voices that Brent Venables values, right? He's going to say, okay, Curtis, we're here today to talk about the 2027 class. Who do you got for me? And Curtis Lawson, the general manager, well, then the meeting will turn over to him, I assume, at some point, and they'll, start talking about the 2027 class and the prospects that he likes and the coaches that he's touched base with in high school in Texas. And here's what he thinks, and here's what he thinks they need, and here's who he thinks they can retain in 2026. Oh, and then there's the transfer portal we got to consider, so we can't be too heavy on 2027 class, freshman class. All that stuff is coming in there together, and Brent Venables, head coach, CEO, right, is going to be the guy who ultimately makes that call. We think, right? I mean, no one's ever had one of these before. No one's ever done one of these before. So there's a handful of questions that you would probably want to know for sure before you take this on full speed. And OU will figure it out. Under Joe Castiglione, they figure everything out. But one of the questions is, who's actually the boss? Who makes the official offer? To the high school kid or to the transfer portal kid. And does this mean, guys, here's the question I would have, and it'll never be answered, but does this mean coaches' salaries, which have been escalating, like a downhill train for the past 20 years, is that going to slow down a little bit, escalating with coach salary? Are the coaches going to basically, in some form or fashion, going to have to take a pay cut if they're answering to or sharing the job with a general manager? I don't know.
Because you have the salary cap or whatever you want to call it with players, revenue sharing.
John,
now there's another $5 or $6 million guy.
It's coming for someone, right? That they're going to try to make more money other avenues, John. But wouldn't you think that, when they say, especially at a lot of schools, well, okay, you can have a $2 million defensive coordinator, but, we can't pay you $14 million anymore.
To the head coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the $6 million quarterback?
Yeah, exactly. Like all
right?
those different, yeah.
Yeah. So this era of college football, we keep saying it every day, every week. It's unprecedented and it's uncharted waters. We don't know what's coming around the corner.
John Craig here, and I'm admittedly a big Oklahoma fan, have been my whole life. And Curtis Lofton, just hear that name brings back such great memories of what an incredible player he was. Where was his place in this from the beginning? Why Curtis Lofton, and just sort of his background into finding him in this position, helping manage the roster, working with the GM, and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, so Curtis was an All-American, went to the NFL draft after his junior year, and then played 8 years for the Atlanta Falcons. I think he had something like 1,000 career tackles or something like that. So he had a great NFL career. He gets out. He comes back to the state of Oklahoma. Goes to, I think he went to, I wrote a story about it about 5 years ago, small college in Oklahoma City, Central Oklahoma, UCO. I think he got his business administration degree. And just been kind of looking for an opportunity. When Brent Venables returned, his linebackers coach from back in the day, right? Brent Venables comes back and says, hey, we're expanding our staff. That's one of the things that Joe Castiglione didn't really want Lincoln Riley to do. Lincoln said, hey, if we're going to join the SEC, I'm going to need a bigger staff. And they're like, do you really need a bigger staff? Well, they did, and he does. And Brent Venables got a bigger staff, and one of the positions that he got was a director or assistant director of the SOUL mission, SOUL, serving others through uncommon leadership or something like that. It's some acronym. But it's a player outreach program. It's a player enrichment program. They take them around. They take them on mission trips, and they do local food banks and charities and stuff like that. So they do a lot of. Curtis was the guy who was basically, I think they had 4 guys doing basically almost the same job or a variation of the same job. And Curtis was one of those 4 guys. And since about January or February, we've known that they're trying to create this position for him, bargaining with, administration, Joe Castiglione and whatnot, to create this position of general manager. And Joe C. signed off on it.
John Hoover with us, SI.com, in this new position. And so now you're going to have this general manager type structure, the head coach and his staff. And then on top of that, there's also all the recruiting analysts. Will they go and be in communication with Lofton? Or I know they might have a lot of meetings, but I think one of the things that happens too much are too many meetings. How's that little structure work?
Can you imagine how many meetings they're going to have?
Oh, dear Lord.
Meetings for meetings, John.
They just brought a former player back, Jeremiah Cradell, as the assistant to the assistant cornerbacks coach. They have a cornerbacks coach, and then he has 2 assistants that work for him. So that's how many meetings they're going to have. The assistants are going to have a meeting, and they're going to report to the CV coach, and the CV coach is going to go to the defensive coordinator, and the defensive coordinator is going to go to the general manager, and the general manager is going to go to the athletic director, and they're going to go and say, okay, let's have a meeting.
Well, all that
what
extra
a nightmare.
All that extra SEC money's got to go somewhere, right, John?
It's got to pay something. That's right. That's exactly right. It just means more. It just means more coaches.
Yeah.
John, Dylan Gabriel was listed as a Heisman favorite by one sports book today. I'm a little curious on that. And look, he was very good at Oklahoma, had great moments, but he and Will Howard kind of in a similar position in that they're both pushed out for the next wave. How do you, again, in this new era of college football, kind of balance that out?
Oh, I don't know how you balance it out. This is one of the things when Lincoln was here, I asked him over the course of his 5 seasons, I must have asked him this a couple of times. How do you plan for who the quarterback's going to be in 2026 when you haven't signed you haven't committed a 2025 quarterback yet, which in Oklahoma's case they have. But in this particular case, you've got a 24 who's a transfer, and you've got a 23 who thought, well, I thought I was going to be the starter, and you've got a 22 who's looking to get out. How do you keep all that straight? It's got to be impossible. So, yeah, Dylan, we saw last year how when he's healthy, how capable he is. He's really good, especially, you put him in a clutch situation like that, right, down at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, and all he does is drive him 90 yards for the game-winning touchdown, and then he's got to go. You got a guy that comes in, a left-handed quarterback, starts 2 years, and after his 2 years are up, he's got to go because why? Because they signed a five-star quarterback in Jackson Arnold, and he's the future. And they've already anointed him on signing day that he's the face of the program. He's the future face of the program. So, yeah, if you're Dylan Gabriel, you're looking for greener pastures, and in this case, it's 100% green, Oregon.
We need that Oregon-Oklahoma playoff matchup in the expanded CFP coming up this year.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of that, John, SEC Media Day starts next week, Monday, right? I believe a 4-day event, and in Dallas at the Omni, downtown, proper Dallas. Obviously, I'm sure you're going to have or have already had articles, talking about the biggest topics, but what is kind of on your mind entering next week and getting a chance to hear from Brent Venables and company and also just see the scene that is the SEC with Oklahoma in it?
Yeah, the big question is Oklahoma SEC ready? And July 1st, whether they were ready or not, July 1st, they were in the SEC. So I think Oklahoma did it right. They threw several, big 2-day long bash parties on campus and in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City. So the fan base is sincerely jacked up about it. So I think the fans are ready. I think the team for the most part is ready. I don't know about, we're talking about expanding the coaching staff and we're talking about new facilities on campus that are still in the planning phases. The school, the football program is trying its best to get SEC ready. I'm sure that'll be a topic that Brent Venables has to answer. It's interesting too. You guys know this because of all the history in the Big 12. Texas has been on a heater lately, right? The last couple of years. They blitzed Oklahoma 49-0, and then they lose to Oklahoma. But what do? They win the Big 12 and go to the playoff. Right now, the national media, which can also be construed as the SEC media, they're looking at Texas. Yeah, they're looking at Texas, and they're saying, "Oh my God, Texas is so amazing, you guys! Texas is unbelievable." And then you got guys like Josh Pate. We've seen it sprinkled out throughout the media in the past couple of weeks, who come out and say, wait a minute, in the past decade, Oklahoma's got a winning record against Texas. In the past 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, 5 decades, 6 decades, Oklahoma has a winning record against Texas, has a better winning percentage, has more championships, more draft choices,
Heisman's.
More All-Americans, more Heisman Trophy winners, right? More national championships. And people are like, wait a minute, when did this start? And, you guys know in Waco, and we know here in Oklahoma, it's been that way for a while.
Always. So, that's when it started. Always.
Texas is kind of the darling right now of the SEC and the media and all that, but who knows what the future is going to look like.
Well, and they were really good last year, but you're right, Oklahoma beat them in that incredible finish.
Well,
and
Oklahoma's bad also, John, and guys, has not been as bad as Texas's bad was. And
that's right.
Except in the 90s.
Yeah.
90s, yeah.
But particularly recently, which is what matters more, right?
No.
When you're talking about everything, this is new Texas. More recent Texas was a disaster.
It was a 10-year floating. And think about the team that even when Baylor won the Big 12 title, what was it in 21? Oklahoma almost played in that game. It was like almost a rematch, was it not, against Oklahoma State?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they've run the conference. They ran the conference. There were some great runs by Mac, et cetera, but it was interesting that they picked the last year to have not their best team because they had 3 or 4 in the 2000s that were great. But, I think the perception is there. I think they're going to be really, really good. It does seem like they're loaded just the right time. Craig, anything else? So what area? What is the Achilles? What is the weakness of this Oklahoma football team?
It's got to be offensive line. They've
great.
got they graduated all 5 guys either to the NFL or just graduation, and they replaced them with actually 6 transfer portal guys. They got a couple of guys back who were fill-in guys or guys who were spot starters last year. But yeah, they have rebuilt the offensive line completely. They have 0 starts returning from last year. And as you know, man, when you see some offensive lines that have a 90 career starts combined, 100 career starts combined, 130 sometimes. Oklahoma has 0. So however they're going to try and paint Jackson Arnold, and they've got one of the best wide receiver cores in the country, and their running backs are really, really talented. Who's going to be blocking for all those guys? That's the big question.
How can that be? How can they get to that point? I know they had the one kid. Did he go to Missouri? That was a really good player, offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah. He went to Missouri, shockingly. So,
well, good news, John, is there's not like a bunch of big D linemen in the SEC. They'll be fine. It's like, no worries.
How hard could it be, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I will say though, like, and not trying to spin it too positively, but if there was a position where you thought like a coach could sit there and make the most out of it, wouldn't it be Bill Bedenbaugh in that offensive line room? I mean, I'm not expecting the world here, but if somebody could make that a positive somehow, it seems like it would be him given his track record.
Yeah, he loves the underdog role. He loves taking 3-star guys that nobody wanted, turning them into first-round draft picks and NFL career guys. So, yeah, he absolutely loves it, relishes it, gets guys to believe that they're underdogs in all situations. So, and then he yells at them and coaches them up. It's big time.
Well, at least their schedule's easy.
Schedule, again, how hard could it be?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Welcome to the SEC.
I've never heard of Gorga.
Yeah, Gorga.
Yeah, I've never heard of him.
Isn't that a dog?
Yeah.
Hey, man, John, great. Thanks for jumping on. Hope you have a great weekend. Have fun. I know you will in Dallas, and pick your brain maybe at some point after it's all done. Thanks for your time.
I'm still thawing out from my trip to Alaska.
Oh, no, let's do that. So you went to Alaska. Did you didn't – I know you didn't snow ski there. Tell us about your trip. How long did it take to get there? Was it a cruise or was it a drive? Tell us about it.
I drove that bad boy all 4,000 miles, and I drove 4,000 miles back. And while I was there, I drove another 2,000 miles. So, it took 5 days to get there, 5.5 to get back. But it was worth it. I don't know what you'd call it, a midlife crisis, just a need to go see family. I went by myself. So it was solo the whole time. I was solo the whole time in the car.
What was the longest stretch that you drove in one day?
27 hours on day one. I went from Tulsa to Glacier National Park in northwestern Montana.
You saw 32 bears. What you might have said?
Yeah.
You might have seen
more beer than bear.
32 bears. In fact, you even described in your tweet. You even saw a bear eating a deer.
Yes, we're about 25 feet away from this bear on the side of the road, just chowing down on a deer.
All right, so here's all: alpine lakes, glaciers, and raging rivers, a caribou. That's cool.
My first, number 9. Yeah.
Midnight sun on the tundra.
Yep.
Moose racing your car.
Yeah, I was driving along. It was about 2 a.m, and I saw this moose, and he took off running with me, and I was like driving 40 miles an hour, and there he was.
Conversing with crows while they eat bugs off my bumper.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny. Crows are incredibly smart.
Would have been a great TikTok video.
I got a video of it.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah. I got a video of everything.
Dozens of waterfalls, which I can't even imagine is how clean and beautiful and pristine all that is.
Yep.
Thousands of miles of snowy mountains. The Arctic Ocean.
Mm-hmm. That was a highlight.
The Milky Way in pitch black Nebraska.
I've never seen the dark sky like I saw in northwestern Nebraska, man. It was unbelievable.
There's only about 7 times a year when it's lit up, and that's when Nebraska's playing a home game.
Right.
And then the 30, you said, is it honorable mention you saw Dave Winfield?
I did, yeah. He's a Fairbanks gold panner. You remember the old Alaska League baseball, minor league, or semi-pro baseball? He's a legend. Played there 71 and 72, and he hit a 550-foot home run to win the Midnight Sun game, which is a world-famous game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they built a statue to him. They put up Dave Winfield's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He's played for 5 or 6 major league teams. He has no statues, but the Fairbanks Gold Panners put one up of it. It was amazing.
And when everyone brings up Bo Jackson or Dion or whoever, Jim Thorpe, as the greatest athlete of all time, his name doesn't get mentioned enough.
It's top 5 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Played only player. No, he's one of 4 players drafted in 4 different professional sports.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
A mountain of a man. Thank you for your time, John. Have a great week. Get some decompression this weekend and then because once the media days, which ours was in Vegas for 2 or 3 days,
Yeah.
and once that
Doesn't
starts,
sound fun at all.
there's no stopping. Thank you, buddy. John Hoover, Oklahoma, covers all of Oklahoma for SI.com.
Yeah, good to talk with John.